The final message from the Titan reading dropped to WTS, an abbreviation for dive weights, meaning the sub may have been trying to rise, not dive, just seconds before it imploded. Roughly 8 hours passed before OceanGate notified authorities, that according to the Coast Guard.
There's certain things that you want to be buttoned down, and that's the pressure vessels. Once the pressure vessel is, you're certain it's not going to collapse on everybody, everything else can fail.
It seems like a lot of the way you made this is by taking off-the-shelf parts and sort of MacGyvering them together.
Yeah.
Pages 18 to 28, the last 10 pages of the Coast Guard's report, deals with the implosion of the Titan submersible directly. I've said this before, but the fact that in 2023, for the first time, they towed the sub to the launch site in terms of the Titanic expeditions, one cannot but see that as a seriously aggravating factor. Who on earth thought that was safe or sensible?
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So we're going to continue our analysis of these final 10 pages dealing with that final dive, Mission 5. Now, I don't know for sure whether OceanGate scaled down to the smaller Polar Prince vessel because of cost issues, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Have a look at what it says there. According to witness testimony, due to high charter rates and non-availability of support vessels based on increase in offshore oil production, 2023 expedition utilized the MV Polar Prince. I really don't know if that's the case. Was there really an increase in offshore oil production in 2023? I suppose that does kind of make sense. But then they had issues as a result of that. It was a smaller ship. It had less capabilities. There was less deck space. And so there were fewer launching appliances and weight handling equipment. And so the craft that they basically got the support vessel to couldn't actually perform its primary function, which is as the support vessel, the vessel carrying the submersible. I also seem to remember Rush saying bitterly that just the fuel cost of the support vessel cost around $1 million. He said, "We've just gone through $1 million of gas." It's also staggering that in 2023, the Titan was towed a total of around 3,600 nautical miles and, unsurprisingly, was unable to perform a single dive, which actually left the platform. That's 0 out of 4. In the waiver, OceanGate admitted a success rate to the Titanic of around 14%, while this was setting an even lower bar this season, so far anyway. Than that. Now let's go to page 19. Look at that. No dives completed. One mission after the other. Things just going wrong. It's actually really no dive completed number 1. No dive completed number 2. The Titan's platform partially sunk in the morning. Wow, how did that happen? Well, that's what you have when you leave the vessel floating in the sea while you're safely on board. Bad things happen. High seas happen. Mission number 3, also no dives completed. Mission number 4, no dives completed. Again, the platform in trouble, inverted to 45 degrees with the bow of the Titan up. This time with passengers on board, slamming all 5 people to the aft of the submarine. In Mission 4, the Titan partially disconnects, and that says something about occupants for around about an hour slammed inside the submersible. None of that seems like a particularly healthy situation. So, in case it's not clear, 1 to 4 were all failures. You can imagine the pressure Rush felt that he was under to score something, to take some success out of that season. To get one expedition down to the Titanic, because so far they had 0. And so all of that came down to dive 5, the last dive, as far as I know, of that season, and also the fatal dive. the last dive ever of the Titan and for Stockton himself. And one thing I think the hearings need to touch on is also Stockton in his own words. He gave many interviews, he gave many presentations.
Does that not raise anybody's eyebrows in the industry?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm definitely an outlier.
I mean, one aspect that I think people don't realize or perhaps don't remember is that he fancied himself as a comedian. He did seem to think he was smarter than everyone else, but I also think he fancied himself as a maverick. And what happens when you put those two together? In any event, let's deal with Mission 5, and we find that on page 20. June 16, Polar Prince departs St. John's at 9:31 a.m. with 42 total persons on board, 17 crew, 24 clients, and one non-designated person en route to the Titanic. Now, those 17 crew really need to be investigated, need to be spoken to, 17 crew members. You've also got potentially 24 witnesses in those clients minus the 3 who died. So essentially 21 witnesses, at least. Anyway, let's go through that. 17 crew consisting of Polar Prince crew members, then 24 clients. So I think this is actually what it comes down to. Who were Ocean Gate employees? 7. 7 of those clients were Ocean Gate employees. 11 were third-party contractors. So I think it's those 7 Ocean Gate employees that you really want to investigate. Then 4 mission specialists and 2 mission specialist companions. Those companions are the people you'd also want to talk to. According to the Polar Prince deck logbook, after departing the harbour, the tow was set to 250 meters astern of the vessel. June 17, that day was spent with all hands an all-hands meeting, training, lunch, presentation, more training, dinner, and a dive plan review that evening. A YouTuber actually provided a little glimpse into that dive plan type meeting and what that felt like and what that looked like.
Once you're out in the middle of the ocean around the Titanic, the waves can get pretty big, and based upon the weather that we are forecast, it did not look good. So
this is footage from Mission 3. So these passengers, including this YouTuber, was basically 2 missions away from dying, from being in that fatal final 5th mission.
Yeah, Kyle.
Nice one, man.
I don't know exactly the game plan for this particular dive. We never left a platform. If the fog didn't roll in and cancel the dive, who knows? Maybe we would have left that platform and maybe we would have imploded.
In the last minute of his video, he says that he feels like he may have dodged a bullet. I'll put a link to that video, the full video, 25 minutes, really worth watching, in the description. Now let's deal with the US Coast Guard's official report, official narrative of Mission 5. It took all of 4 hours to prep the craft that morning, to load the passengers, to sink the platform, and to launch the vehicle. On page 21, we see the dive plan. I think one of the witnesses testified to say that morning everything went so smoothly, it was incredible. The final risk index for dive 88 was calculated at 35. Is that reasonable? Is that accurate? What does that actually mean? I don't actually know what that means. Risk index is at 35%. I don't really know. Something tells me the actual risk index was much, much higher, because we're dealing with a material that fatigues. We're dealing with so many aggravating factors, including this craft being left in a parking lot where temperatures went down to minus 17 degrees. That really can't be good for something like carbon fiber. And so another question is, was the weather a factor? That's slide number 22. It does seem as if wind speeds were, I think, lower than average, but I'm not quite sure. I can't quite tell what those lines represent. Is one of them an average line? If is the average the blue? Is the average the orange line? Can't quite tell what's going on there. It does seem as though the winds on that day were 13 to 19 knots, which I think is fairly low for that sort of area. 2 to 3 meter wave height seems to me quite high, but for that sort of part of the ocean might be normal or below average. we do know that they struggled on the other missions to get the craft to disconnect from the platform. Well, they weren't able to do it other than on mission 5. So I can't really tell. I guess that's going to be established during the hearing. Page 23 deals with all the milestones at 5:48 a.m. The accommodation ladder was placed over the side of the vessel. You've got some of the clients now transferring from the vessel to a rigid hull inflatable boat. This is their version of the tender, right? And then the dive supporters would basically ferry some of the passengers to this platform and get them into the submersible. At 7:35 a.m., one of the rigid hull inflatable boats was loaded with the Dive 88 crew to transport them to the platform. At 8:30, the 5 members were loaded into the Titan. And then at 8:55, the platform was vented. So they were inside for about 25 minutes, and then the platform sank down to an operational depth of 30 feet. And at that, which I think is about 10 meters, is that right? And then the divers would then underwater facilitate the full disconnection of the vessel. The Titan's final ping was at 10:47:33 seconds at a depth of 3,348 meters. That's fairly close to the maximum depth they were trying to achieve. This was 6 seconds after messaging dropped 2 weights. From this, it seems likely the implosion was unexpected and without warning. Also, the dropping of the weights may have been the final straw, the sort of precious straw that broke the carbon fiber camel's back. And we get that from slide 24. The question is also, in the aftermath, did OceanGate follow correct safety issues? It does seem like 8 hours is a really, really long time to alert the Coast Guard. Did they turn off the Wi-Fi following the incident to shut down any social media impact, or was that part of regular protocol? So on slide 25, we see at 10:49:50, the Polar Prince sent a message to the Titan that said lost tracking. There was no response. The Polar Prince continued messaging the Titan at 2 to 3 times per minute. That's quite a lot, with no response. At 11:15 a.m., the master of the Polar Prince was advised that as of 10:47 a.m., there was a loss of communication with the Titan. In itself, that took almost half an hour. According to the mission director, they followed the missed communications protocol outlined in the OceanGate HSE manual. Then going to the final slide, when the Titan did not surface, OceanGate followed their procedures and the Polar Prince began a grid search pattern. Now, they were expecting the Titan to surface at 3 p.m. And so it seems like for at least 6 hours, they didn't alert anyone having lost communication. Think about that. They lost communication for, not 6 hours, for 4 hours. That's still a really long period just to have no information from Titan, nothing about where we are, we're coming up, nothing. And then a further couple of hours passed, I think another 4 hours where they would search the surface, still didn't find them, and still didn't contact the Coast Guard. They finally did that at 18:27, following a meeting it says here, the master of the Polar Prince stated, at 18:27, following a meeting in my cabin with, amongst others, OceanGate staff. Yeah, the names are redacted. Those staff members really need to be identified and investigated, and they need to account for themselves. Anyway, the master says, I called the Joint Rescue Coordination Center, Halifax, by sat phone, but communications with JRCC were shortly thereafter cut off. I wonder what that was all about. When I re-established communications, I was informed by the JRCC that the area of the Titanic wreck is under the jurisdiction of RCC Boston. At 7:10 p.m. local on June 18, in accordance with OceanGate loss of communication protocol, after 3 hours of searching with negative results, the Polar Prince contacted the Canadian Coast Guard. Now, what I find crazy is that in their own sort of protocols, they don't even seem to know who to contact, because the Canadian Coast Guard weren't the right people. They were supposed to contact the US Coast Guard, right? That coordination center in Boston. So they didn't even know who to contact first. It's like not knowing to call 911 and calling some other number. Upon receiving the notification, the 1st Coast Guard District Command Center entered the District Phase 4. And then we kind of know what happened after that. There was a lot of searching, a lot of resources, the sense of time is running out, the clock is ticking. Actually, it wasn't. There weren't any survivors. There wasn't anything about we need to find them before the air in the submersible runs out. And so on June 22nd, 2023 at 10:50 a.m., basically 4 days later, the Pelagic Research Services 6000, a remotely operated ROV, which had been searching since arrival at the distressed location, discovered the Titan on the sea floor, and this discovery led to the conclusive evidence of the catastrophic loss of the submersible Titan and the death of all 5 members aboard. What is not mentioned here is something that is kind of classified, I guess, is that they actually the US military actually picked up the signature of an explosion right at the time that there was a loss of signal. So there was no question really all along that there were going to be any survivors. Slide 88. During the 2 recovery operations, presumed human remains were discovered from the Titan ocean floor site. The remains were recovered and transported to shore. The Air Force medical examiners did DNA profiles for the 5 victims, and the Rhode Island medical examiner matched the DNA profiles to the victims and then coordinated with the families. Right, now that we've dealt with the US Coast Guard's complete report, we must see if we can answer all 5 questions. Number 1, did the crew know the craft was about to implode? I think the answer to that is no, but I think one person on board the vessel could have and should have foreseen the likelihood of catastrophe. I think the real question is who in the crew of the support vessel, which of those OceanGate staff members was responsible, or in this case, chiefly irresponsible for safety? Number 2, did it implode while descending or ascending? At this point, it appears that it wasn't ascending, but had merely slowed its descent. You may recall James Cameron felt that there were signs the craft imploded after dropping its weight while ascending. Well, we don't know how much weight, or we didn't know how much weight was dropped. Now it seems like not a lot of weight was dropped. And so I think he was half correct on this aspect, but maybe we need additional clarity. Number 3, what was the actual attitude to safety? Well, the desperation to do dive 5 by Stockton no matter what shows to what extent greed and ego were at play here. Profit before safety, an ethos Rush may have gotten from Boeing. Number 4, what were the final communications with the Titan? In other words, what does the authentic transcript reveal? Well, unfortunately, nothing very exciting. Someone suggested the last message was the ironic all good here, but that wasn't it either. The transcript doesn't seem to provide any hint whatsoever of any trouble. Number 5, how serious were the safety issues? Who knew about them and who absconded their responsibilities in this regard? Well, they were very serious given what ultimately happened. Clearly, Stockton knew the issues, but who else is culpable remains a question for the ongoing public inquiry to address and answer. Right, I'm not going to take it any further than that. What we are going to do is, once again, I'll be covering the live stream today. It starts, I think, at 8:30 p.m. local time. As far as I know, Lochridge is still testifying. I really do want to hear Ms. Renata Rojas's testimony. I think she was on board the previous year. And then I also want to have a look at Patrick Leahy from Triton Submersibles and Guillermo Sonheim. So I'll be covering that as and when it happens. So watch the space. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.